Good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening. Shall I share my screen?
So we can wait for 5 more minutes. Just
Okay.
those participants are joining.
Yeah.
Good evening, all. Since people are still joining, we will start the meeting in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Good evening, Manoj, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening,
Good evening,
Nikhil, sir.
Manoj.
So shall we start?
Yeah.
Sir. Okay, Aradi, please
I
do the
think
comparing.
we can start, yeah.
Aradi, you can start.
Okay. So good evening, one and all. It is so happy to see the house so filled. Before we start, I kindly request all of you to please mute your mics and turn off your cameras. In case of any queries, please feel free to use the chat box. Research is seeing what everybody else has seen and thinking what nobody else has thought. With that ideology in mind, the IEEE Education Society Kerala chapter, in collaboration with the Hyderabad chapter, welcomes you all to the third session of the tri-webinar series on various aspects of research. Today, we are so happy to have you here for the final webinar on the topic Publish, Patent and Prosper Strategy. To handle the session, we have Dr. Manoj P.S., Chair of IEEE EMB Society Kerala chapter. He is also a professor at the Department of Avionics in the Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. To deliver the welcome address and to give a brief introduction about the speaker, I invite Dr. K.C. Ravindranath, Research Activities Chair of IEEE Education Society, Kerala Chapter. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Fortunately, this is the third webinar in the tri-webinar series on various aspects of research, and we have a very distinguished speaker for this for delivering this third webinar, another than Professor B.S. Manoj, who earned his PhD from IIT Madras in 2004. He held a postdoctoral research position at the University of California, San Diego, California, USA, from 2005 to 2008, where he subsequently worked as a research scientist and lecturer. In 2011, he joined as an associate professor in the Department of Avionics in the Institute of Space Science and Technology, Trivandrum. He became a full professor in 2017 and served as the head of the department and dean of avionics during 2016-2019. He received several awards and honors, including IEEE Outstanding Researcher 2020 from IEEE Kerala Section, Teaching Innovator 2016 from the Ministry of Human Resources Development, Government of India, an Outstanding Leadership Award from IEEE ICNC 2015, and the IBM Outstanding PhD Thesis Award in 2004, to name a few. He proposed the MHRD awarded multi-track modular teaching as an innovative method of research-oriented teaching, which is now being used by several autonomous institutions and universities across India, and for improving the employability of students. He is an avid and vibrant IEEE volunteer and currently serving as the chair IEEE Kerala Chapter for IEEE Kerala Society Chapter for Engineering in Medicine and Biology Society. His current research areas of interest include computer networks, software defined networks, wireless mesh networks, IoT, complex networks, 6G networks, and cybersecurity. He has published more than 150 international publications, including journals and peer-reviewed conferences to his credit. He has also authored or co-authored 3 books and 9 book chapters. I formally welcome Dr. B.S. Manoj, our distinguished speaker, to deliver his talk on various aspects of research, which is the theme for today's talk is patent, publish, and prosper your research activity. Thank you. Welcome, Manoj.
Thank you, Professor Ravindranath, for this invitation and the opportunity to talk to you in this series. I'm very glad to be here. So it's a third in the lecture series. Without much delay, let's start that. So this is the agenda for this particular talk. In the last talk, I was mentioning that I will give a slightly different agenda. I was planning to give the strategies for high quality research, particularly including use of productivity tools and solution design methods and research oriented teaching. But after having seen the program flyer where the title was announced I got really interested. So I slightly modified the agenda to suit that title. So today we will have a discussion on solution design methods and the importance of published, patent, and prosper with a brief history of peer review and the topics important for publishing, particularly the new methods of publishing. So let me begin that discussion as we have quite a lot of points to cover before our designated time getting over. So I just want to recollect a few points. This is aimed at Indian research scholars, particularly in the engineering area. Of course, some of the topics may be relevant for science too. Most of the talk contains ideas that I think will be good for you. Of course, there can be disagreements. Obviously, it's possible. And in case if there is a network disruption during this lecture, we'll be back in a very, very short time. Please don't feel bad about when if at all there's a network breaking. So I just want to mention about a few techniques for solution design. Solution referring to research solution. Okay, when you have a research problem, you may have to come up with a research solution, and there have been a lot of strategies that historically, engineers and scientists have practiced, some of which are here. One possible approach is to have a scaled model to do, where a small model is used for research solutions. And another solution is to actually transfer the problem domain, where you will be able to handle it much more easily. And the third is to use computational modeling or to have simulators which will use computing power so that you will get a clue of the research, or sometimes even the solution itself can come from that computational model. And fourth is an insights approach where research insights can be obtained, which can solve very, very hard problems. And the fifth is a mathematical approach where you actually derive the expressions and thereby do that. So I'll cover the first four in detail, as a mathematical approach is fairly well known. So if you look at the scientific method, or popularly known as the method for a scientific process or scientific discovery, is to actually observe the problem domain, and you frame a question that is actually called the research question, or the question that is aimed at solving a problem, and define a hypothesis for arriving at a solution to solve the research question. And you conduct a series of experiments which can be theoretical, mathematical, theoretical analysis, logical, or empirical, and so on. There can be several experimental methods that you will be framing after that. Through the experiments, you will be able to get a conclusive observations which can be translated into result, so that you will be able to publish into what is it called patents or papers or other means. So this is what is popularly known as a scientific method. So these solution design approaches or methods are actually relevant for these two particular domains. Okay, either during the experiments or framing a hypothesis as part of solving the research question. So now let's look at each one of these in a little bit of detail. So the scaled model approach is very widely used solution. If you have been a researcher in traditional engineering areas such as mechanical or civil or other aerospace, you must have seen several experiments are actually modeled experiments, scaled model experiment. So you will build a small model to study its properties, and then scale the observations or the properties to the actual model. So in fact, you will build a small aircraft model to study its aerodynamic properties. So you will do a small, maybe a nose cone. If you design a nose cone, the nose cone may be looking something like this, and you will actually put that across in a what is it called, a wind tunnel, to observe what is the aerodynamic properties. And this may not be the actual scale. This will be a scaled down version. And you do. In fact, recently in a company in Trivandrum has carried out that wind resistance modeling of the Statue of Unity. Statue of Unity is the biggest statue in the world now. That was actually the statue of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, which was so tall that the wind resistance can be so huge that it will affect the structural stability. And this was actually scaled down to hundreds of 100:1, and then conducted in a very small wind tunnel to get the results and the studies, and to observe what kind of design, structural design changes are required in making sure that the design works. So that way, you actually use a small subset of the system or small scaled version to study larger sized problem and get results of the larger sized problem. In fact, you will also do sometimes a very small network construction and study its properties to see how it will work in larger network. In fact, most of the social network research, you study a large population by looking at a very, very small sample. If the sample is properly selected, it can actually reflect the characteristics of the population. So that way, if you consider the dimensionality or scales from macro to micro to nano to quantum, in most of these scales, a scaled model will actually work. For example, except probably nano to quantum level, because when it is coming to the quantum level, the properties change and the scaling does not work. So wherever the properties in the scaling domain is retained, you can actually do scaled model approach. And if your research problem is such that you will be able to do that. So in all these three scales, say macro, micro, nano scaled model approach for solving a problem is effective and useful as far as my observation is concerned. But in quantum domain, as I mentioned earlier, the molecular properties itself will be very, very different, and you may not be able to apply the scaled model. Now, domain transformation approach is another very, very popular method where you have the problem that is transformed to a different domain so that solutions can be easier. So you must have already, found out, in the logarithmic domain, from the linear to logarithmic transformation results in mathematical operations becoming very simple. Say, large number multiplication can be done by just doing simple additions of the log values if you have the logarithmic table available. Okay, so that way it becomes a very simple operation. Another example is actually transformation from time to frequency domain, which is very, very popular in the entire electrical engineering area. So, for example, if you want to design a filter and you cannot easily do a study in the time domain, but when you convert this time domain signal to amplitude versus time domain signal to equivalent frequency versus amplitude signal, that will actually be very giving a very good opportunity to understand, model, and create a solution for the problem. In fact, for having a lot of such transformation solutions available, like Fourier series or transform, Laplace transform for circuits and control, set transform for discrete time signals, and DSP, image processing, wavelet transforms, and so on. So these transforms have been invented for such simplification of the problem domain, so a researcher can actually address some of the issues involved and some of the hypotheses that can be proven. So, in fact, the analysis of such a transformed problem is rather easy. In fact, in some of the physical domain problems, when you transfer this physical domain dimensions to a graph theory domain, that will actually be a very good modeling, which will give a domain transformation. So the key approach used in network science or complex networks or graph signal processing approach is actually the transformation from physical world to a graph theory domain. So it's very important to see whether a new transformation that can actually be possible to help you in your problem. In fact, in almost all such cases, the domain transformation, particularly a new transformation, has opened up a research possibility that is unlike anything or much beyond our imagination. So this not only the transformation, if that transformation is useful for your problem, it can be useful for a variety of problems, a set of problems. So that way, it can create an entirely new dimension of research solutions. So that way, this is a very, very important thing to look up whether any kind of transformation that you can carry out to solve this particular problem. A third very popular approach today, in fact, it is very popular for all domains of engineering, including traditional engineering like civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical, as well as science domains like chemistry, physics, and so on. So, of course, in engineering like EE and CS domains, this is very, very popular. So, where you are using a computation power to simulate or computationally model a physical world scenario, and you try to study some of the scenarios, or you try to solve or try to verify the hypothesis and seeing whether you are able to find a solution. In many cases, you cannot build a real world system to study a hypothesis or to prove a point, and because they can be very expensive. For example, if you build a 1,000-node computer network, that can actually take crores of rupees and thousands of manpowers to build. And obviously, as a researcher, you may not be able to do that. In fact, if you want to study the capacity issues of a 10,000 user cellular communication network, that itself will require funding that we cannot afford, or even the entire state government cannot afford. So that way, it can be too expensive to build. But these things can be studied using a network simulator, where you can play around with the hypothesis under various conditions. So this opens up possibility to be solving problems that you may not have even anticipated. So in fact, in many of the social network cases, computation models are very, very useful because social experiments cannot be easily conducted at large. In quantum network models, building a quantum network or building a quantum computing system is going to be extremely expensive, and it is available only to selected countries or even selected companies in selected countries. So you cannot actually afford to do that by yourself if you are a researcher in that area. So you are depending only on quantum models or simulations, which will be actually useful. So I have already mentioned the use of simulations or computation modeling in molecule design, chemical interaction studies, or chemical experiments. So if you want to design a kind of new molecules, particularly large kind, and their interactions, sometimes these interactions can become very disastrous, and physical experiments without having a computation modeling can be very, very dangerous. And today it is becoming very, very significant to actually model in computational tools and then study before you actually do any kind of practical chemical experiments. So now let me just show one example where computation modeling has helped my research group. So we have been trying to study a kind of networks that are very popularly known as scale-free network in our laboratory. So scale-free networks look like something like this. This is a depiction of a scale-free network where you can see some nodes, node 1, node 2. These two nodes have several neighbors and several edges. Whereas if you see, there are a few other nodes with a fewer number of neighbors. And you will also see certain nodes with just no neighbors or just one neighbor. Okay, so you can find that the distribution of number of neighbors or neighbor degree is somewhat like a exponential distribution or power law distribution like this. So probability of finding k neighbors or k degree for a node is proportional to k power minus gamma, where you will be able to find it can vary from 2 to 3 or even 1 to 3 in some cases. So this is called the power law degree distribution. This defines what kind of degree distribution nodes undergo. So we have been looking at how these networks are formed in real world, because many of the real world networks have this kind of character. In fact, in social networks, you can find this kind of character system. So when you look at the literature, so internet has this scale-free model, World Wide Web has email networks, have electronic circuits, language distribution, movie actor relationships. They have a scale-free social network. Food web has a social scale-free network, metabolic system. All these things are actually, having the scale-free network model, which has certain degree exponent as you may be able to find in this particular. So the question is that how this network are formed and what makes the network become really scale-free. So in fact, these are 3 examples. A is actually the internet host, where every dot here is an internet node, and such a complex network that you cannot easily study that. So complex networks model will help you study that. This is actually a network for air traffic network, where every point here is an airport. With more traffic, the airport gets more neighbors. That is becoming a hub node kind of thing. And this is actually social network, paper citation network, where which researcher is citing which other researcher's paper. Some papers are very popular, some papers are not so popular. Most papers are not popular because they are only one citing paper. But there are certain papers, the paper here, or the paper here, or the paper here, which have several more citations. So all these networks are actually, what is called a scale-free network. So in our lab, we try to study this using computational modeling or simulators. So my PhD student Abhishek has conducted an experiment. So he tried to take a linear string topology network with the 40 nodes. All the nodes are here; they are connected with like a string, and then he randomly added one edge that's a long link to this network, and tried to find what is the average path length for all pairs of the nodes. And then he conducted that series of experiments. The second long link is added again randomly. A third long link is added again randomly. A fourth long link is added, and a series of long links are added to make the network more complex. And he got this kind of distribution, which is somewhat uniform distribution with various sizes of nodes. And subsequently, he conducted a simulation experiments where we tried to add an optimal addition. So this optimal addition is actually adding a node in such a way that the average path length is minimum. Okay. So what that means is the addition of this long link 1 brings the average path length across all pairs of nodes to the minimum possible one. So how he has done is by doing an exhaustive search, and he added a one LL across all nodes. Every time he calculates the APL and find out that adding an edge here as well as here actually resulted in what is called the lowest average path length in this network. And then what he did is he repeated that for a second lowest second long link, which gives further lowest average path length. And he found that one edge will come at the node 32 and another edge comes at node 20. And subsequently, when he continued the experiment, and he found very strangely that one particular node emerges as a hub node. Okay, as a hub node, it attracts several edges to that, and the network becomes globally optimal with average path length minimum. And when he looked at the distribution, degree distribution, and he found that this comes with something like exponential distribution, power law degree distribution. So that way, he has been trying to prove that there is something happens in the network as you grow the network in a globally optimal way, and that has been conducted in a simulator. Subsequently, he has been able to model that problem theoretically because he got the insights and clues that certain nodes are automatically becoming very important node in a network when you consider global optimality. And this could not be conducted in a manual experiments or in a scaled down. In fact, this is a scaled down experiment because a larger network could not be done due to computational limitations or computing power limitations. So in fact, he scaled down the size. He also used a computation model for this particular experiment. And subsequently, he was able to prove that the two nodes in a linear string network, one at the 20% point and another at the 80% point, are actually providing optimal values for an addition of a long link for the entire thing. So theoretically, he has proven what has been given as a clue by the simulation experiments in this. So that way, you can get computing power, get you research clues that can be used to do theoretical proof subsequently. And there is another way where many of the hard problems are actually solved. It's not actually a way it's actually happening. So this is called the insight approach. Insight approach is actually, due to your thinking, due to the researcher's thinking, you get an insight, and this insight usually comes as a random outcome because of your experiment, because of your thinking, because of your horizontal as well as vertical thinking, and you might arrive at a solution to a very, very hard problem. So one of the example is this, popular story about Archimedes, who was who was actually assigned to find a way to detect if the king's crown was actually, polluted with other material other than gold, or goldsmith has stolen gold that is given to build the king's crown, and he could not actually find out a solution for that. For several days, he has been thinking over that as per the folklore, and he finally, when he was about to take bath, he found that the water flowing out of the sink, whenever he put his leg or hand into the water, and whenever he got into the water, more water flowed out. And then he strangely felt, that is nowadays people call the Europa Moment, and he suddenly felt that there can be a solution. And he found that the weight of the water that is overflown due to himself entering into the sink was proportional to his weight, and that was actually used to solve this particular king's crown problem. So similarly, many problems are actually solved by getting an insight, and how this insight comes is actually a very interesting point. Another very popular solution where an insight, very crucial insight solved the problem, is actually Königsberg Bridges problem, where the famous mathematician Leonhard Euler solved this and created the area called graph theory. Okay, some of these insights can create an area. As I have earlier mentioned, some of the transformations can actually create an entire new area too. So the Königsberg Bridge problem is, in fact, I would recommend you to read this particular link from MIT. This link actually gives some very good discussions about the insights problems. I'm taking two examples from that. So Königsberg Bridge is actually a bridge that is located in today's Stalingrad in Russia. And in that particular area of Russia had two islands. So this is actually one island formed by the Pregel River, and there was a second island, and because of the river branches out, these two land pieces became islands. So there are 7 bridges coming out. That one was here, and then the second one, third one, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 7 bridges were used to connect the two islands formed by the Pregel River. So the question that was troubling the minds of many of the researchers and mathematicians of those times was this one: can you walk through the city crossing the 7 bridges exactly once? Okay, so that means you have to walk through this bridge. For example, if I'm walking through this bridge and coming to this landmass and again going through this, I will come out here and then I'll come out. Now I have a question whether to take this bridge or this bridge. If I take this bridge, I will not be able to go any further because I have already crossed the other 2 bridges, in other 4 bridges in this landmass. Okay, or if you go here, then you are missing this particular bridge. There is no other way. So this question was not easy to solve. Of course, one could have solved it by using an exhaustive search, trying out all possibilities, but that is not really possible for a larger graph. So what Euler had tried is to create what is called a representation of this area of the bridges as well as the land areas into what is called a graph. So where each land mass is actually a vertex of a graph, and every bridge is actually called marked represented as an edge. So a graph is nothing but an abstract data structure which will be a formation of a set of vertices and the edges. So he modeled the physical problem into a graph problem and tried to identify insights. And he found one very important insight that if you have only 2 edges, two vertices with the odd number of edges, okay, odd number of edges, you will be able to solve this problem. Otherwise, you will not be able to solve this. Or if you have only 2 vertices with odd number of edges, you can actually say, yes, I can walk through the city crossing all bridges exactly once. And if there are more than 2 vertices with the odd number of edges, you cannot solve that. So if you look at this, so the vertex A has 3 edges, and vertex 3 has 3 edges, and vertex B has 5 edges, and the vertex D has 3 edges. So there are more than 2 vertices with the odd number of edges, and you cannot do that. So that's why exactly we could not actually traverse all the bridges and come back to without passing through each bridge more than once. So now if you look at one particular very simple example, so imagine that you have hello, can you hear me?
Sorry, you are not audible.
Yes, sir, audible.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Some video problem. I'm not able to see my side. Let me just check. Give me 1 minute. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it has come. So my screen went blank for a moment. Give me a second to start the presentation. Okay. So thanks, it came back. I thought we had to restart the machine. So the insight here is his observation that you have to have only 2 nodes or 2 vertices with the odd number of edges. So this is what the example I was trying to say. So you have 4 nodes, A, B, C, and D. Okay, or D. So if you look at B has two edges, C has two edges, and A and B has only one edge. So let me add one more node to this situation, say node E. And now what happens is node C will have three edges. So when you have node C three edges, this situation cannot be solved based on this problem. So you cannot walk through all the edges once and touch all the vertices. So that way, because you need to have one beginning node and one ending node where you can have odd number of edges. But if you have a third node with odd number of edges, you will not be able to do that. Because anytime when you enter into a node which is not a beginning node or ending node, you have to come out of the node 2. So this node is not the beginning or ending node. Node C is not the beginning or ending node. So you cannot come out a second time when you enter it a second time. So that is actually the insight that is derived. In fact, getting this insight is actually a very, very complicated thing. And almost all researchers are struggling to get this kind of insights for their problems. So one of the ways where researchers can actually get insights is actually using what is it called research preparation. So training our brains to think about solutions that you otherwise normally think. So one example, one way to create your brain to solve insights or to create better insights is to actually prepare your brain to solve new things. So when you are starting, if you are a research student, you are starting a research program, say PhD, masters or whatever. So you obviously will have your coursework, you will read a lot of research paper, you will conduct an experiments, you will do a lot of evidence collection and prepare your research paper and so on. So to help you get creative mind, I strongly recommend you start learning something new in addition to your research. So that can be something like you take a class which will be for a research problem. Sorry, not for a research problem, which will be something like a music or to painting class or to learn a new sport or whatever. So regularly participating in this for a very, very short time can actually help you get neuron connectivity, bringing new neuron connectivity in either parts of the brain, which will help create insight for your research. Now, that brings the question of the brain characteristics. So as you all know that there are the left and the right part of the brain. So left part of the brain is good for the academic activities, languages, analytic skills, logical, as well as the scientific skills. Whereas the right part is actually helpful for the imagination, creativity, feelings, artistic visualization, including music and other kind of artistic capabilities. So most of the researchers who have been able to solve insightful problems have been able to use both the right as well as left side of the brain. Okay, so in fact, there are a lot of stories on why this is actually very, very useful. Okay, because the insights come from creative mind as well as a creative mind with technical knowledge too. So that way, how to use your right side brain more often, that can actually help your left side brain to do insightful research. So one of the possible ways to use this right and left brain, so better insights, and you can actually use the left part of the brain as well as the right part of the brain. So the right part of the brain usually controls your left side of the body. So you can use the left side of the body to improve the right part of the brain. So that means you can use your left side, left hand. If you are a if you have a dominant right hand, you use your left hand. Say for example, you can brush with your left hand. This is actually going to help the right side of your brain. Okay, so you will actually bring a better neuronal connectivity in the right side of the brain if you actually work with the left hand, left leg, left side, and so on. So if you just try to take take bath with your left hand, apply soap and take water, and you can find a certain kind of strangeness in using the normal activities that you do with the left hand. So in fact, if you try to write with your left hand, unless you have practiced for a long time, you will be writing something like when you were like a 3-year old. Okay. So after writing like 1 to 2 years, 1 to 2 years of practice, you will see that significant improvement is actually happening in the left hand. So when you actually develop your left half of your body by using the left leg, left hand, left part of the body, this is actually going to be very much useful to develop the right side of the brain, and that can actually help. In fact, many scientific experiments have been conducted to prove this point that you can develop the right side of the brain by using the left side of the body. In fact, many people say when you squeeze a ball regularly with your left hand, that is actually proven that right side brain is very, very useful. So this way you will be able to improve the ability to develop insights that can actually be very, very useful for research. Now, let me come to the point, the second main point, publish, patent, and prosper. So your scientific prosperity depends on regular high quality publications. Say, imagine, in fact, it is very, very important that you regularly publish. So this regularity is, if you are in the job market and you don't have publication the last 2 years, your chances of getting a new job is very, very poor. Okay, so unless you have this regularity maintained in publications, you will not find future opportunities coming your way. So research reputation of you will depend entirely on this. So another way, if you are in the industry or if you are in engineering research, R&D development, so you may not have publications. In that case, you may have patents as a route for developing intellectual as well as scientific prosperity. So, which means that for every work, we need to make this choice, whether it is good for a publication or a patent. So if your idea is of academic and scholarly value, you should try to publish that. Or if your idea is commercially exploitable, then you should actually try for a patent. So this is very, very important, that do not waste the results that you produce and make a value out of that. Now, publication is very important because you used to disclose your scholarly publishing to your peers, population, and the future generation. So your peers will get to comment and respond and give a feedback about your work. So, in fact, the most important thing in the publication is that you make a contribution to the advancement of science, engineering, and thereby to the humanity too. So, this is like you caused something and you are communicating that. So, while this is the essence of publication, a paper is a main scholarly document, and most important scholarly document which presents your results, discussions, observations, hypotheses, whatever. And all your intellectual outcomes produced will be reported in this document. And what is a publication? Publication is nothing but it is an act of an author or a scholar that makes his paper or his document available to the readers. So you have different channels that can be used for this publication. As you may be only using, conference proceedings are one, journals are one. Of course, there are different kinds of journals today, subscription-based or open access, print versus online. Books are, in fact, one of the most important and traditional means of publishing was actually books. Before the conferences as well as journals came into existence, books were existing. And today, there are new other means of publishing your scientific results. Preprint servers or self-publication route or social media distribution route. So typically a publisher allows several of these channels or operates several of these channels. So you will be able to use one of them. Now, let me tell you some insights on why this publication is very, very important and what kind of publications you should target at. So imagine that you get an idea. But you get an idea, you're a scientist, you developed a lot of technical know-how, and you are suddenly thinking of a very, very new concept, and you are not publishing it. So, this is as good as you have not developed the idea itself, okay? Because you have not published it, that means you have not even thought it. So, this is like you have not done it, okay? That way, this is insignificant. And second thing is you get an idea, you worked out a paper and you are deciding not to publish it. So this is your paper. Okay, you have somehow noted down a paper and you are deciding not to publish it. Nobody is seeing that. So this is also as good as you have not done at all. Because this paper is not going to be seen anybody because you are not published it. Okay. And you consider you have an idea, you have worked out a paper and you have published it. So you drafted a paper about the idea or the result, publisher has accepted, and this is to some extent good. At least there's a published document that is carrying your name that is actually discussing your idea or result. Okay. So in fact, you may have published and there is nobody reading the paper. There is no reader to that, which means you have produced a paper, but this paper doesn't have a reader. There's nobody reading that. There's no visibility to your paper. Then it is as good as only you are the reader to your paper, and that is actually losing value. So what's the best thing is you have an idea, you published, you wrote a paper about it, you publish it, and your paper is actually visible to a very large community of people. So you are able to communicate your idea to a very large population of researchers or scientists, students or others. So this is actually the most important thing that as a scientist you should aim at, to communicate your results to a very large population. So imagine if nobody has read your paper, it's as good as you have not done or you did not even have the idea itself. So that's the reason why publication is so important, because if you have not published your ideas, then it's as good as you have not even thinking about it. So in fact, before 1730, there were only self-review or superior review or an editor review that was existing in peer review. In fact, the first peer review concept came by the Royal Society of Edinburgh, which introduced the peer review for the first time, assessing by establishing a committee to review the papers came to its publications. Then in 1893, British Medical Journal adopts peer review for its own journals and papers. In fact, Anthropology Journal, Current Anthropology, introduced in 1959. In fact, one of the most famous and most influential journals of today, Nature, started the peer review process only in 1964. So it's actually relatively recent concept that we all now know as peer review. But today, in fact, in the 90s, the situation has changed, where people started using what is it called, a preprint services. So in 1991, Archive, which is a service from Cornell University, that started accepting draft papers, which are called preprints today, to be launched there. So one of the reasons why this was required, in those days, the review cycle was very long. If you look at the time frame, you got your idea here, and you worked on this for like 1 to 2 years to get your solutions ready, and you draft the paper, maybe another 6 months, and then you submit it. Okay, you submit here, and from the submission, you are actually getting something like 1 to 2 years before it can be published in one of the best journals. So, but what happens is, this is your case, and a peer. Research is a very competitive area, so your peers are also investigating. They can actually work a similar idea. Maybe what they have done is they have worked much later. Maybe they have got the idea here similar to yours, and they developed it, and subsequently in 2 years down the line they also got published. Unfortunately, you got your paper rejected. Okay, because of some confusion, some data, some doubt by the peer reviewers, your paper rejected, and your peers' paper got accepted. And then what happens is your idea ownership is lost. Your peers who developed the similar idea or overlap idea much later got the paper accepted. So you, as a researcher, lost the value of an early inventor of the same idea. In fact, In fact, with some of the inventions, even days and hours of differences made a big difference. There's a big story about Alexander Graham Bell, who filed the patent for the telephone slightly earlier than a competing researcher who invented a similar device. That actually had gave Alexander Graham Bell a big advantage, which led to the establishment of Bell Labs and telephone services across US. So that way, it's possible that you must have developed some idea, you communicated the paper, and you have got rejected in the peer review. And subsequently, when you resubmit this, it is actually going to take another couple of years. So that delay had affected many researchers. And as a result, people used to avail this service like archive, where preprint can be stored in a repository. That preprint, if this researcher had stored preprint in some of the repositories, his invention was recorded as the first person who tried that idea out or proposed that idea. That would have saved, valued him or marked him as the inventor of the idea. So that way, the large number of preprint repositories are existing today. So one of the example is here is actually the top 10 archival preprint repositories available from Wikipedia. You can take a look at that. So in fact, the first one was Archive. Archive have about now 1.8 million papers. It's very hard to deposit papers into this preprint repository, because you need to have some sort of authentication to do that. It's not easy to get that. So in fact, whatever had been started subsequently in this area had become even more popular too. In fact, today, the countries have understood the importance of this. So you can look at this China Archive. I would say China Archive. China Archive has been established in 2016, and they have realized that preprint server for a country was needed. Indonesia had set up a preprint server called Inarchive. So which means that the preprint service is becoming very relevant, important. It gives access to the researchers without having to go through the subscription. It gives early it actually gives credit for the earliest inventor of any particular area. That's actually one of the most important things that began the requirement for this archive or preprint-like services. So, now, in addition to this archive-related or preprint-related services, today social media is actually playing a very, very big role. So, social media distribution of research papers are found to be very effective for many researchers that I'm recently observing. Similarly, publication aggregation services such as ResearchGate and Academia, which allows people to see the paper, people to get alert about your paper. You can distribute your paper to a set of readers who have interest in seeing the paper, get their feedback, get a query, and so on. So your paper will get a better reach, better visibility if you avail these kind of services. Now, let me show one example of how much popular this is. So this is an example from the study conducted with the Scopus database in 2015. This was being conducted in 2015, but using the data up to 2014. So in Scopus recorded papers, you can see that all articles were something like 1 million plus, okay, between maybe 1 to 2 million papers. After that, a vast majority of the papers have been open access papers, and about 100,000 papers were repositories in archive data. So that shows the increasing usage of the preprint services and the value that the authors receive because of that. Today, when a researcher is searching for a paper, one of the first few versions of the paper that comes from archive is used very heavily by the users. Google Scholar, indexes papers from archive too. So the citations from the archive is actually being respected as citations of your published research papers too. So that way, this is shown as a visibility metric of your papers, which is very, very important for a researcher. Now, if you look at the conference proceedings vary in significant domains. If I categorize into three classes, where the top ranked conferences, where the acceptance rate is likely to be very, very low, 5 to 20%, because these conferences have very high visibility, very harder than journals to get accepted a paper into these conferences. In fact, some of the top quality universities like Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, all issue PhD degrees with for students who are published in these conferences without having a requirement to publish in journals. So these conferences are very influential. Only very novel papers will get accepted. These are highly domain specific. Some examples from our domain in computer networks is like IEEE Infocom, ACM SIGCOM, Mobicom, Mobihawk, and Census. So these are actually highly reputed conferences with sometimes single digit, less than 10% of the papers accepted. Okay, that kind of difficulty is there in getting accepted a paper there. So the second category, the middle tier, I would say medium ranked conferences that can have 20 to 50% acceptance. They may not have very high visibility, not probably very influential in terms of impact. Multiple domains may be covered, a limited number of domains may be covered. So IEEE, WAPCOM, ICC are all examples of that kind of middle tier conference, second tier. So there are a lot of other conferences which are of low ranked conferences. So they accept anything that comes into their submission system with a very poor visibility. In fact, in some of such conferences, publishing there can affect your reputation. So if you publish in some conferences like that, you may not actually, you will spoil the reputation as a researcher, and such papers should not be there in your curriculum or in your CV. So that way, in fact, any paper will be sent there will be accepted. So the exact list of conferences that will fall into this particular three categories will depend on the domain. Only your guide can help on deciding what is falling in what category. So your guide should be able to decide where exactly a particular conference is standing from his own publication experience. Now, let's look at journal publications in a very, very brief manner. You must have seen that there are very highly ranked journals which may have very low acceptance rate, but very high quality and impact factors for the journal. So the tough thing or the bad thing with this journal is these journals is that the review process is very long. Particularly if you are a PhD student and you are getting like 2 years or so for a paper review, it can be really, really hard. But usually it takes 1 to 2 years. Even though journals are trying to make it shorter, it is really, really long. It can take even 3 years to get a paper accepted. But their reputation is very high. If you have such a paper in your CV, your chances of getting a very good post-doctoral position or a faculty position or industry position will be extremely bright. So all IEEE transactions are of this category. They are all highly reputed, and IEEE journals, ACM transactions are also highly reputed for this particular matter. A paper in these journals will significantly boost the reputation of your CV and yourself too. The second category, if I rank this into a medium ranked category, they have medium quality and visibility. They might accept a fairly large number of papers. The reputation is medium, not very influential. Most of the journals in LCB or Springer or IET can actually be part of this category. In fact, some of the LCB papers may fall into the high tier category too, based on the impact factor and so on. And I would strongly advise you against going with very, very poor quality journals. Many journals that start with IJ are actually having a publication, poor publication reputation. So having a journal paper in such journals can actually bring down the reputation of you. So that way, again, as I mentioned earlier, the best person to advise you whether a specific journal is of certain quality is your PhD advisor or your guide. He will be able to advise you where a particular journal stands in your domain. Say power electronics has a different set of journals compared to computer networks or signal processing or other areas. So I have mentioned briefly about the social media outreach for the research papers. This is becoming much more important today because it can give you wider visibility for your paper. So YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, all these are social media tools or social media handles that can be used to post your important findings. So I have earlier mentioned you have an idea, you have developed the idea, experimented that, and you got the results, and you wrote a paper about it, and you have submitted the paper to the publisher. Publisher accepted it, and now we want to see that many people are able to benefit from your paper. So this audience for your paper, or the discourse community for your paper, or the users of paper should be as large as possible. So you need to make sure that you need to disseminate the contents of your important papers to a larger audience. Then only they will be able to do. So the reason I'll tell you this, the number of papers, if you look at the previous curve that you used to, so if you look at say 2000, this is when I was actually a PhD student there. So you see that the number of papers submitted was something like less than 1 million to this one. Okay. Now that is almost doubled. Okay, this is about just one Scopus indexed journals. There are many other journals outside the Scopus, and you see the number of publications that are coming out of these journals is actually quite large. So that way, when you have large number of papers, getting visibility, getting the paper to a reader is actually becoming a very, very big challenge. And that way, you should get social media outreach very, very importantly. Sharing the paper through research paper aggregation services like ResearchGate is very, very useful. I've been able to get so many queries from researchers to discuss about their paper, to share the papers for their research through this ResearchGate service. It's very, very useful service, which I don't get from IEEE ACM or any other service. So there's a value addition when you actually sign up for these research dissemination platforms that you don't get anywhere. In fact, some of the services are existing. For example, this kudos.com is actually a new service that was advised by ACM to me when we published one paper there, that will allow a researcher to actually post a graphic abstract for the paper. So this graphic abstract can actually be used. This is something like a single image that is representing the entire paper. So when you look at the image, the graphics, you will get an idea about the paper in a very, very easy way. So that way, they help improve the outreach for the paper. So that is actually very, very important. In fact, I would recommend you must post a 5-minute video about every paper. If you think the paper is very good, that you can post it through online in YouTube, Vimeo, or other kind of video platforms. That way, that your paper may get a visibility better than other papers that you don't do this. So this is a very, very important step that you should do. Now comes the role of publishing. Now, there are two ways. One is the traditional publication by the traditional publishers, or self-publishing, that where you are actually taking the cost of the publication. So the difference I have briefly summarized into these 4 points, like royalty, distribution, marketing, copyright, and sales, future editions, and so on. So usually when the traditional publisher, it's a good quality publisher. If it's a good publisher, top-ranked publisher, this is a situation. Okay, if you have a very bad publisher, and 15% royalty will become something like 1% royalty. That is actually not a good choice. Okay, you should not get it to a poor publisher. So the distribution responsibility of the book will be the publisher. Marketing responsibility of the book will be the publisher. Copyright is usually held by the publisher. Sales volume will be higher because publisher has a marketing network where a lot of executives are salaried, and future edition possibilities are usually the publisher's decision. Whereas when you choose a self-publication option, you will get a much higher royalty but the responsibility for distribution or responsibilities for marketing will be yours, and you usually do not have a mechanism to do that, and therefore your sales will be low to medium, and you will hold the copyright, so future editions can be your own decisions too. So now if you see the publication difficulty, acceptance is actually very difficult. Okay, a publisher will not accept a book when you try to publish your ideas through a book. It's very difficult, and this is actually very easy. So these are some of the difference between the publication, research dissemination to publication of books. So let me just summarize the strategy of visibility improvement for the publications. Either you publish the paper through a conference, journal, or book chapter. For the research papers, you must distribute the preprints either through your homepage or through popular preprint servers. Okay, I would recommend either through your homepage and through the popular preprint servers. And then you should definitely attempt a social media outreach if you believe the paper has merit and the paper has utility value. That should be used by many more people. So these are some of the example services where social media these days many IIT professors actually post their papers through LinkedIn, and either abstract is posted and a link of the paper is also posted through that. So that is becoming useful to them to reach out to more users for their paper. So it's very important because the volume of research that comes out from every part of the world is much higher, and you need to make a conscious decision to make an outreach decision. Now, let me stop here for now. What we have covered is the solution design methods and some aspect of the publication, patenting, and prospering activities. So I not covered the following topics which may not be possible today because of the limited time that we have. So using the productivity tools as well as research-oriented teaching and the patenting process also not covered in today's lecture. If there's a future activity, future possibility, we'll be able to cover those things. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me now.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you, Manoj, for the excellent talk on the publish, patent, and prosper activity.
There is one question from Dr. N.P. Subhish. Like Google Scholar indexing for preprints, is there similar indexing in Scopus and Web of Service for preprint archives? So as far as I know, I don't know if the situation has changed now. Scopus was not indexing preprint archives, but they have recently, Elsevier has started a preprint service by recognizing the value of the preprint support. Let me just show whether the slide I have is among the top 10. There is a thing. I remember one of the preprint services had been purchased. I don't know whether it is Elsevier. This is actually not listed here. Actually, here it is. So the SSRN was actually a multidisciplinary preprint service. Even though it was not started by Elsevier, it was actually purchased by Elsevier in 2016, and they have close to 1 million papers in the index. So, which indicates even the bigger publishers found value in the preprint services and servers business. So, if they have this preprint service available, then they will definitely be doing the indexing very soon if it's not already started. So, it's possible. So the next question, how can we communicate paper to archives? Okay, so the archive, the most pioneering service called Archive. This was actually started by Cornell University. So they have certain restrictions. Only if you are actually nominated by somebody who is already a member of Archive, you can actually post a paper. So that's one of the reasons why they are not the number one in this, despite their initial establishment in 1991. So you can see much services that started much later have accumulated more preprint contents. Okay. So because Archive is not easy, you need to have somebody recommending you to be a member, then only you can post it, and you have to actually continue maintaining that record at least 3 or so over a period of time, every time. Otherwise, you will lose that eligibility. So now I want to point out you don't have to depend only Archive. You can look at there is an IEEE supported service called Tech Archive. Tech Archive is yeah, it has a picture here. You can Google for this particular name. So this is actually an IEEE initiated service you will actually be doing for EECS related areas. So you don't have to only depend on Archive. In fact, it's time that given the country level archives, countries like India should have an archival server for all publications from India too. So, okay. Yeah, for every archival service or server, there's a different way to communicate. So if you log in there and sign up, they will direct you how to do that. So I mentioned only that difficulty to do that in the original one archived by Cornell University because they have some restrictions in anybody submitting the paper. If you have any question, any further questions, feel free to let me know.
Manoj, I have a question.
Yes,
what is the prospect of publishing in IEEE open access journals?
Yeah, on the visibility side, if you consider the visibility of your publication, it's very significant improvement. You get significant value. If you consider the citations, impact of your paper, very significant improvement you get. But if you consider the cost of that,
Yeah.
it's a very, very difficult thing. The reason is that, you have something like 60 to 70,000 rupees per paper, which is not affordable unless you have a very good source of funding. Okay. So this is actually going to be the, but you get value, but at a significant cost. So if you have a project funded, yeah, you can think about it, but otherwise it's not going to be easy. So the growth of open access is also causing this particular issue of financial divide. Those who are rich can publish more; those who are poor cannot publish. So that is actually going to be very hard on people like researchers in India.
Yeah, thank you, Manoj.
Yeah, just to add Ravindranath sir's question. Recently, I published a paper with funding from University of Dubai that was in IEEE access, sir.
Okay.
So it is an open access journal, as you know, and whether that will affect, it will be termed as a paid journal, something like that. When we since IEEE access is a paid journal, so will it affect the reputation?
Reputation.
Right. IEEE access. If I tell you my honest opinion, okay, that's a broad journal, broad area journal, multidisciplinary journal. Everything from electrical engineering to computer science can go into that particular journal. But other IEEE journals are not like access. So IEEE, after having found the evolution of the research journal market, they have decided to have that kind of a broad area journal, which has both the pros and cons. I'm not getting into the pros and cons, but if you ask the reputation aspect, yes, it's not comparable to an open access publication in any IEEE transactions. Yeah, to this IEEE access paper. So IEEE access paper has a reputation which is slightly lower than other IEEE journals and IEEE transactions. So that's because of the broad area and also because of the peer review process and so on. So that way there is some, but if you consider the visibility of the paper, that paper may get much bigger visibility than a paper published in a better quality journal. So that way, if your paper has technical merit, that will actually reach a larger population of researchers. So thereby you will be able to bring up value.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, let me just, there is one question, Anand Ramendran is asking, there is another question. Is graphical abstract similar to a block schematic? Sabina is asking. So graphical abstract is like a picture, a graph, which might be more than just a schematic. Sometimes it will have some result. One result graph and one architectural diagram may be there. That will convey the summary of the paper in one sheet. So usually, you can create after 2 or 3 images available in the paper, a very good graphical summary. Now, sometimes the graphical summary will have a caption to briefly explain what is that summary referring to. So just one format, the idea as well as results. But you can derive from the images of the paper a very good graphical abstract. Anand is asking the question, if you post a paper in preprint servers like SSRN, will it violate IEEE publication policy? So today it doesn't seem to be violating that because violation comes into effect after the formatting of the paper, after proofing the paper, violation comes into effect. After signing off the copyright terms and conditions, the violation can happen. But whatever you do before that, a version before that, the violation is actually not there. However, recently people have noticed a different issue. When you are submitting a paper to a double-blind review journal, for example, a journal where the author names are not known to the reviewers and the reviewer names are not known to the authors, that's called a double-blind review journal. So, for example, IEEE ACM transactions on mobile computing is a double-blind journal. If you submit a paper to that, your author name should not be there in the paper. But if you are actually submitting a preprint version of the same paper, then author names may be there in that preprint. Then just by Googling the title of the paper, they will be able to get access to the preprint paper. Then author names are revealed to the reviewer. So the double-blind review is to ensure fairness for the review. So reviewers' reputation do not bias the decision made by the reviewers. But then the preprint with the names available, author names available, that is visible to everybody and visible to the reviewers, violates a double-blind requirement. And a few papers have been rejected because the papers have not followed the requirement of double-blind review process. So that way, there are some issues. But if your paper is actually single-blind, where author names are present in the papers under review, you will not have any copyright issues when you upload the preprint server.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. That was really an informative session. Thanks a lot for your time and effort. So if all queries are addressed, then let's conclude this session. Now to deliver the vote of thanks, I invite Professor Sai Kumar Tara, Senior Member, IEEE Treasurer, IEEE EDSOC, Hyderabad Chapter. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, madam. And I thank on behalf of IEEE Education Society Kerala Section and as well as IEEE Education Society of Hyderabad Section, I thank Dr. B.S. Manoj sir for a wonderful talk for the TRI webinar. Sir, we are very happy and we are honored to be as a speaker for this TRI webinar, which is organized by both the sections, education chapters. And it was wonderful. And we are very happy to be collaborated with the Kerala section. And thanks for the chair, Varghese sir and Raghavendra sir and all the EXICOM members of Education Society and as well as Kerala section. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, sir, for the note. With that, we are wrapping the session. The feedback form for the session is provided in the chat box. Do fill it out. Thank you all for attending and have a great evening. We will be back with the next session in the series soon. So till then, goodbye from us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.